what's going on in the fact that it's moving around like this, besides the fact that I'm moving it?
Well, it doesn't just bend, it rotates around and squinches down and becomes stronger and tighter.
Like this?
Yes, but you can then, by changing one of these tight structures or by sometimes tilting one of the stiff structures, you can create movement through the whole system.
Which is what I'm doing here.
Right, and that works very much like these Jacob ladder blocks. So this old toy, by just changing the angle of that one of the blocks, you can get it to move back and forth and flip back and forth. And that's essentially what you're doing in this structure. This is really a two-dimensional effect, but in these structures, you're of course getting three-dimensional, and it becomes a spiral. But the spiral is a wood screw spiral, not a machine screw spiral. It gets smaller and tighter, or then expands out.
Again, I'm just building these things as linear models, so I could have made each one of these sets of dowels smaller, and we could have had a needle tower like one of Snelson's sculptures.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But of course, you're using linear material here, so you can never get it perfect. In biologic structure, you're starting with this structure.
The self-assembling part.
The self-assembling icosi, so this is where you're starting right here. So this all is all the same. When you're building, you're stuck with having to use, linear models, and we're stuck with
Okay,
that.
so in a way, this is a column, a tensegrity column, rather than a Greek column.
That's correct.
And each one of these could be made of one of these. So we could have a series of tensegrity columns for to replace each one of these struts. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Right. So we can get smaller and smaller.
Yeah. Since it also takes tension and works in tension, you replace the tension elements with the same structure.
Right. Right.
So they integrate with one another.
So that's the microscopic level.
That's at the microscopic level, but it works equally well at the macroscopic level. Most of my work as an orthopedic surgeon has been at the macroscopic level.
Fixing people.
Fixing people. For years I was a cutting surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, and I was interested in the mechanics and the knees, and particularly the spine. But I was never really satisfied with what went on and what I was taught, because I couldn't understand, say, the dinosaur's neck, which is, of course, an extreme example for us, because we have this big structure like this leaning out all the way out.
So here it is, the dinosaur's
right,
neck.
There's your dinosaur's neck, because
he can look up, he can look down.
But you can't do that in a lever system without having a high mast and a pulley on it.
Yeah.
See, but this does it from within the structure itself.
Right.
So you built here a representation of a neck, which would represent a bird's neck or a dinosaur's neck, and a smaller version, a human neck.
How about an elephant's trunk?
Elephant's trunk.
Or my cat's tail?
Cat's tail. Now this is a multi-segmented one. If you had a stiff section of each there, you would then make one part a joint.
Right.
So you can build this as an arm with a joint part, say there at the wrist. So we could say that this is the wrist of this hand. And this would be stiffer, and then we can put the elbow, say, in the middle, or the shoulder here.
Okay. So how about a knee then?
Well, here's in your model, your knee, you've shown this, that you can float the structure one on top of the other.
Right.
They don't have to press on one another.
Right.
And if you've represented very well here, that they sort of interdigitate. There's fork one another, so that you can get one that's higher, one that's lower, and it always remains in that relationship to one another. And that seems to be a key element in these structures.
Now, when I look at a bone, say a femur, and how it fits together with a tibia, say, it doesn't appear that the condyles are really passing past each other that much.
Not much, but they do. But in the knee, you have the added advantage of having a patella that sticks out in front, which is probably another point in this structure.
Yeah.
Because since they're all integrated, the tension elements are all part of
like
it.
just adding one of these things to it, like so?
That's what it would be, and it would be sort of floating in the softer part. So it would be like attaching this to these ligaments and sitting out there.
And you're calling those sesamoid bones, right?
Sesamoid just means a bone sort of floating in the soft tissues.
Right.
But in the tensegrity concept, all bones are sesamoid bones.
They're all floating.
They're all floating compression
Yeah,
elements.
this is where I have a hard time, I guess, because it's hard for me to envision. I mean, I stand up and it looks to me like my femur's pressing on my tibia. And
Right.
It looks like I'm a column at that point.
It also looks like your tooth is pressing on your jawbone when you bite on it.
Yeah.
But it's long been known that the tooth is in a suspensory ligament,
Right.
and no part of the tooth itself actually pushes on bone.
Okay.
It's all suspended at ligaments.
Right.
Not only that, but even when you bite, your teeth don't actually touch. And that's why when the dentist tests you, he puts that black thing in there and he says, bite, bite, bite.
Yeah, yeah.
And he looks for it to slide back and forth.
Okay.
Because it really, in the body, hard surfaces don't press on other hard surfaces, otherwise they wear out very quickly.